But the three questions, the three practical questions that I believe will help shape your life is who am I? What do I believe? And where am I going? Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome to the Success and Significance Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Newman, and I am super honored that you chose to spend a little bit of time with us today. As always, if you can do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, like it, share it on social media. The reason that that's so significant is that the more that you like, the more that you share, the more people can figure out how to fight for success to pour out significance. So today, what we're going to do is the episode is going to be, it's a continued exploration of living for success and pouring out significance, but we are going to be diving into three fundamental questions that I truly believe if we get as leaders and we get as entrepreneurs and we get as just humans in general, it will make our life a lot easier. And it will be these three questions that when life has the carpet flipped out from underneath you, pulled out from underneath you, that these three questions will help you stand back up to make sure that you are focusing and forging forward. And so it's three practical questions. It's not going to be any questions that you haven't heard before, but these three questions are something I guarantee that it takes intentionality to be able to stop just to even think about these three questions. And so we're going to dive right in. So the first, I'm going to give you the three. And then today, what we're going to do on this episode, we're going to unpack one question at a time. And then you'll be able to catch the other questions on some more episodes that we'll be launching. But the three questions, the three practical questions that I believe will help shape your life is who am I? What do I believe? And where am I going? See, those three questions, I promise you, you've heard them before, but those three questions have helped shape my life and my leadership for the last 10 years. And so this was a little bit longer than 10 years ago. In 2008, I was in the construction world and ended up losing absolutely everything. And I believe that there's curbside moments for majority of people, and it's either you can stay seated or you can stand. And what I mean by that is mine was actually a curbside moment to where I'd lost everything. I was in business with a builder. He ended up filing bankruptcy. I had two cell phones around me and the phones were ringing, and I knew that it was over. It was that gut sinking feeling to where I knew that everything, I had payroll to make that I wasn't able to make. I had my phone blowing up. I owed vendors a whole lot of money. And it was in that moment where I knew absolutely everything was over and I couldn't stand. Meaning I was on the curb and I ended up laying back on the sidewalk and I had no idea what to do next. And so the significance of this, and this leads into the first question, is that who am I? And in that moment, I had put my identity in my construction company. And when I ended up losing my construction company, I had no identity. So I had absolutely no understanding of who I was as a human. I had no idea what I believed. I honestly would tell you that I thought that I was probably going to go to jail because I owed people so much money. And I ended up losing everything that was valuable to me in that moment. But it took me on this journey that has led me here 15 years down the road. It was about 5 years after that I met with a mentor, and he sat down with me and he gave me these three questions. So the first question, we're gonna unpack it, and I hope that you can be able to relate to this. If you have never had a curbside moment, good for you. But if you are trying anything of significance, if you're trying to create, innovate, push the envelope forward, you're gonna have a curbside moment, and these questions will help you stand. So we're gonna jump right into it, and the first question is, who am I? I'm going to ask it again. And so who are you? And I think that this statement that I have written down in my journal, who you are is more important than what you do. I had put everything of my entire identity and being into my construction company. And when it was not there, I had no idea who I was. So it's not just your name, which is super important. You've been given your name, but I've met many of people that have changed their name. And I'm curious, like, when was the last time that you asked yourself who you are? When was the last time that you stood in the mirror and, like, if you're having a good day, ask it, who am I? If you're having a bad day, this is where it's so important, is who am I? Because who you are is more important than what you do. And who you are also as a human If you know that, then it will help you navigate the circumstances. See, the reality is your circumstances are constantly changing around you. And you can't, majority of the time, you can't control your circumstances. But what you can always control is yourself and who you are. So knowing who you are beats the fear of reality of today. And so even just as I've navigated the last 15 years, I've had to ask myself this question multiple times. And once you even can define who you are, it's not a question to where like you define it. I have a bunch of journals. So I wrote down, okay, who am I? I wrote it down one time and then I put it in a journal from 15 years ago. No, that's not the case. This is constantly being evolved and evaluated to where if you just have these 3 practical questions, it will help you. So let's define it first. Who am I? This question, the reason that I think a lot of us don't have the time to do so is that this question makes us explore our actual identity. And so that's a hot topic right now. We're not going to dive into all of the identity things that are going on in this world, but this question makes you reflect on your identity. It makes you pull out your values. And then the other part of this question is it helps point to what you believe, which we'll unpack on the next question. It prompts us to asking who you are, helps us prompt to like our weaknesses and our strengths. It also, what it does, it pulls out what are some of your passions, right? So who am I as a human? What do I like to do? So if you like to work 1,000 hours a week, actually, let's make it practical. If you like to work 80 hours a week, there's nothing wrong with that. That your identity is becoming in success and it's becoming successful. So who you are, you want to be successful. There is nothing wrong with that, but it also has some limiting factors around it if you want something other than just success at work. And the other part of this question, the significance of this question, it puts us on a course for self-discovery. And I think a lot of people, when it comes to self-discovery, it's a multi-billion-dollar a year business, self-discovery, self-awareness. A lot of people don't want to do self-discovery. Why? Because they may be scared of what they see. But it's super important to self-discover. It's super important to know who I am. And then it signifies or signals self-awareness. And for me, for the longest time as a leader, being self-aware is super important. But this is probably one of my weaknesses that with some of the coaching that I've been through has just brought to the level or brought to the surface of like, hey, Eric, if you're having a bad day, that doesn't mean everybody else around you is having a bad day. You need to be enough self-aware to be able to push that aside to still exist in society. And if you're leading anything of any value, when you have people that work for you, you have people that report to you, or if you're not even, or you're just going in and you work in a cube farm, you still have to be self-aware. But self-awareness is crucial for a couple reasons. A, it helps you with personal growth. It also helps you and it allows you to become more of an effective communicator. And if you're doing anything of significance in this world, you're going to have to learn how to communicate your ideas. You're going to have to learn how to communicate with team members, with employees. So it helps you with effective communication. Self-aware also, it helps you with decision making. If I were to come in and I'm having a horrible day and I sit down with my leaders that help run Rock Solid Foundation and I'm having a horrible day, and they put all these things in front of me, like you got to make a decision it doesn't matter if the carpet's blue, right? That's not some of the decisions I make, but it's still, hey, are we going to go to a 3-box system, to a 1-box system? Or if your boss comes in and you have to present a bunch of things to them and they're not self-aware and they're having a bad day. And when you do ask the important questions, the boss is probably not going to make the right decision. So we have to know who we are to help us become more self-aware that helps us with our decision making. The other part is too the emotional regulation. I think knowing who you are truly, not allowing your circumstances to dictate who you are, but knowing truly who you are as a human helps you manage stress, cope, and it allows you to stay calm in some very difficult situations. I find myself constantly in challenging circumstances because that's who I am as a human. I know that I was put here for a moment such as this to push the envelope for the pediatric cancer community. And I also know that I am designed to be able to pour out the things that have been given to me the same way. The reason that I'm doing this podcast for the last 15 to 20 years, people have been investing into me. And I know that I am a leader that is supposed to do the same thing. And the last thing that self-awareness allows us to do, it helps us improve our relationships. So even either you're married, you have a partner, being self-aware and knowing who you are helps me become a better husband. It helps me become a better dad. It helps me become a better leader. It helps me become a better friend. So knowing who you are makes you more self-aware, which then helps you improve your relationships. And at the end of the day, I firmly believe that this life is about people. It's about relationships. It's about what you're pouring out to this world that helps create a legacy. So that's why like knowing who you are is super important. A couple techniques to help you realize who you are as a human, it's self-reflection. And you got to make it a priority. We've talked about this a couple times on the episode. So how do you self-reflect? So you can't see it, but above me, I have a bunch of journals. I've been journaling for the last 15 years. The first way I would encourage you to start identifying who you are is taking the time to look in the mirror, but then also journaling down, writing that question and writing who I am. The other thing is meditation has helped me. So I call it prayer meditation. I go into the steam room for about 15 minutes every single day, and I sit there and I meditate on these 3 questions. Why? Because that night before I came home, life was super crazy. Probably if I had to score myself between a 1 and a 10, 10 being the best at being a dad and a husband, I probably scored 3. So I had all that stress. I had all that guilt on me because I know who I am. I know that I'm a great dad. I know that I'm an amazing husband. So in that meditation side to where I'm in the steam room, taking 5 minutes, taking 10 minutes to just self-reflect is another way that can help you identify who you are. The next is if I love to run, so I go on runs constantly, fighting an injury right now. So I do have to get some better soled shoes. That's just telling you how old I am. But then the other component is if you're not able to run, then go on a walk. And with the self-reflection and in this walk, all that you have to do is ask, who am I? And remember, this goes to your identity. And a lot of our identities with our names have been given to us. A lot of our identity has come from our past experience. And to be totally honest, a lot of our past experiences are not always the best experience. So all of us come with some sort of baggage that has helped create our identity, that has then formed what we believe. And then at the end of the day, then it dictates our goals that we put in place to where we are going. So who am I relates directly to your identity. Well, how do you figure out your identity? A, you got to ask the question. B, you got to do some self-awareness. C, you got to do some self-reflection. And then I would highly encourage you to do some journaling, some meditation, some go on a walk. And then the next one is, it's very similar to the first, is journaling. But this is a gratitude journal. And so what I mean by a gratitude journal is even if it's not a journal, it's a piece of paper, if you have Post-its or if you have somewhere that you can type, I would highly encourage you to just write down 5 positive things. I call it 5 PT. I do it every single day and I write down 5 PT, 5 positive things in my life. And if you're sitting there right now listening to this podcast and maybe you've gone through a breakup, you've had a death in your family, you just got fired from your job, and you're sitting there and you're listening to this podcast, I promise you that there are 5 positive things still in your life. One of them is you still have ears to listen, you still have breath in your lungs, and you're still able to see. You're able to, if you're sitting in an apartment, at least you have walls around you. But I highly encourage you to figure out who you are as a human, that you need to do a gratitude journal. And that helps with your mentality. That helps with your self-awareness. It is a constant reminder that it could always be worse. And see, the world that I dabble in helps remind me all the time. I was just speaking with Frames, the guy behind the camera, right before we got started, talking about that we sit down with families at their worst case scenario that their child has cancer. And so you talking about a gratitude journal. Anytime that we sit down and we hear these families talk about the joy that they've been able to find in the journey, and they're able to just see the positive, they're able to extract the hope after some of the circumstances have not ended the way that they wanted them to, we still have something to be positive about. The next thing about figuring out who am I or who you are is write down some of your strengths and some of your weaknesses. Assess some of your strengths, Another good thing for this is there's all these types of profile personalities. You got DISC, you got Strength Finder, which none of those are endorsed in here. You got Myers-Briggs. So go to the website and find some personality tests that you can take, and that is a great place to start. The one that I use the most is DISC, and so you go to Google, type in DISC personality test, take the test, and then it will email you the results back to you, which will tell you if you have a dominant personality or if you have an inspirational type of, you like to be around people, right? So I highly, highly encourage taking some of the strengths tests behind that. And then what that does also, it creates some of your weaknesses that it will show that will also help you start to become who you are. And then another question to ask is, what brings you joy? What do you have fun doing? For me, I love to hang out with my family. I love to communicate. I love to read. I love to write. I love to take my wife on dates. I love to play baseball with my son. I love to play volleyball with my daughter. I love family time, and I just like to disconnect from the chaos of the world. And so as I start to figure out what fills joy, then that ends up in the gratitude journal. And then the gratitude journal, then what I do is I start meditating on the stuff that I'm grateful for. And then the stuff that I'm grateful for ends up in my regular journal, creating all these ideas of what I want to do with my family. So it's everything affects everything in this boiling system. And as I conclude, the best thing that I can encourage you to do as we're on this journey to figuring out who am I as a human is you need to take some time and just think about it. Do some of the practical stuff that we talked about. Go on a walk, get a journal out, take one of the DISC assessment tests. And the best thing that you can do is the next time that you walk past a mirror, stop just for a second and ask yourself, who am I? And if all that you have is your name, that's okay. Because in this, bad aim is better than no aim at all. And so if you have your name, you have your age, and even say what you do for an occupation will help you get the ball rolling. This is hard. These 3 questions are practical, but they're extremely challenging. So I highly encourage you to write down the question and to get started to trying to figure out how to become successful, to pour out significance. We're going to dive into what we believe and where we're going on the next episode. So I encourage you to continue to chime in, and I'll leave you the way that I leave you every single time. Fight for success to pour out significance. We'll talk with you soon. Thanks, guys.